All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're starting about 15 minutes early. This might be one of the shorter Tech Thursdays, similar to last week, because there really isn't a lot of stuff that's happening in the tech space right now that's actually worth talking about. There has been a lot of interesting games that have come out in the last couple of weeks, especially last week, with the Elder Scrolls for Oblivion remaster, as well as Clair Obscur Expedition 33. If you've been following this channel, you would have seen gameplay of the latter, which we have been covering in depth on the channel. That is what the background image here is portraying. That is Expedition 33. So we will probably be doing another stream tomorrow covering this game in depth. Also, one thing I do want to point out, I have talked a lot about Monster Hunter Wilds. So Monster Hunter Wilds it is a live service game, but it's not like your typical live service game like the gacha games, for instance. So they are doing a limited time event. Yes, I know FOMO events, they're a thing in live service games. And this week, as of I believe, was it yesterday? The 29th. So no, like 2 days ago actually. Yeah. So as of the 29th, Arch-Tempered Radow. So this quest here, A Silent Flash, is available from April 29th, so that was like 2 days ago, until May 13th. So if you're somebody who has not played Monster Hunter Wilds in a while, like you took a break or whatever, now is the time to go back to the game, because if you want to take on a very challenging monster hunt, the Arch-Tempered monsters are some of the hardest, most challenging hunts in the entire game. So this is the very first Arch-Tempered monster. So just wanted to point this out for those of you that have been playing Monster Hunter Wilds. If you're not aware, the first Gamma armor set is available if you're able to clear this hunt and collect the commission tickets. So Radow Gamma armor is available. We will probably do a live stream this weekend showcasing the Spring Festival event in Monster Hunter Wilds, because I believe that event is only available for one more week, if I'm not mistaken. I like how Capcom does show, yeah, so next week it's going back to normal. But Arch-Tempered Radow will still be available. So this is the last full week, as of like 2 days ago, to get your armor sphere farming in and to get that Radow Gamma armor set. So we'll be covering that. I'll be showcasing that hunt probably, I don't know, Saturday. We'll see. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe I'll stream Monster Hunter and Clair Obscur Expedition 33. But the main game that I personally have been playing this week has been Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So we're going to go over tech power-ups. Excellent article here. We did talk about this article earlier in the week. I think it was Monday. I was live streaming the game because I was trying to get through the story. So we will probably stream the final boss fight in the game on stream. So if you're someone who wants to avoid spoilers, you're probably going to want to avoid the section of that live stream when we do that, because I'm basically at the end of the game. I just need to finish the final boss fight, and I can view the credits and the ending, and that's it. So, but there is a bunch of stuff to do in Endgame, in Act 3. So the game is 3 acts long, including a prologue. The prologue is like the first hour or so of the game. So altogether, the game can be cleared in around anywhere from like 30 to 40 hours, which is a good amount, because if you want to get all the post-game stuff, it's going to take you about 60 hours or more. I myself am about 40 hours into the game. Like, I've been playing, my playtime I think is like 41 hours or something. So, and I'm enjoying this game. Like, so far, this game is absolutely the best game that I have played all year. Prior to this game, those of you who've been watching my channel would know that Monster Hunter Wilds was previously my favorite game of 2025. In fact, that was my personal game of the year of 2025. Now, my game of the year 2025, so not, the Game Awards. But this game, Expedition 33, has now managed to surpass even Monster Hunter Wilds. And that in itself is an incredible achievement, considering that this game was developed by a core team of around 30 people. It took only 30 people plus a couple of people that they contracted later on to do certain things. In particular, I think they did something later on. Microsoft was also involved, but Microsoft was only really involved toward the latter phases of their go-to-market strategy, the developer direct interviews and that sort of thing. So Microsoft did promote the game, and that's one of the reasons why Expedition 33 is available on Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, definitely check this game out. I would not be surprised if this game not only gets on the nomination list for Game of the Year of 2025, but I would not be surprised if this game actually wins Game of the Year 2025. Now that's saying a lot. So definitely check it out. It has something for everyone. If you like reactive, high reaction time, challenging gameplay, this game has it. If you like turn-based RPGs that are very story-driven and character interaction-driven, it's got that. If you like an excellent AAA musical soundtrack, this game's got it. If you like high-fidelity Unreal Engine 5 graphics with Lumen and Nanite, basically modern generation graphics, this game has got it. So this game has something for everyone in the gaming space. Definitely check this thing out, especially if you're a fan of traditional JRPGs. This game is basically a modern take with a Western flair on making a traditional Japanese role-playing game from 20 years ago or so. It definitely has that old school, early turn-based Final Fantasy vibe mixed in with Persona and Nier and Sekiro and some, From Software sort of influences. But the artwork is great, the creativity of the biomes that you visit in the game. The game has an overworld that's so old school, but it's so good. It basically has everything. Definitely check it out. If you have not seen it yet, I will be live streaming it tomorrow, but do keep in mind that I am very, very far into the game. I'm basically at the end of the game. So if you want to avoid spoilers, we won't be showing too many spoilers, except for possibly the credits and the ending. So if you want to avoid that, you probably don't want to tune into my live stream tomorrow, or at the very least, you're probably going to want to tune out of the live stream after the Monster Hunter Wilds section. So we'll probably do Monster Hunter Wilds first and then Expedition 33. If I do that, it'll be a very long live stream though. So do keep that in mind, or we'll just do one or the other. One on Friday, one on Saturday, something like that. But let's dive into the performance benchmark review from Tech Power Up. They tested 33 GPUs, which is perfect for a game called Expedition 33. So interestingly enough, this game is one of those rare games that does not have FSR support, but it does have Intel XeSS. Now it has NVIDIA DLSS, so if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can use DLSS for the upscaling. It has absolutely no frame gen, so it only has either native rendering or upscaling. So the game has 3 upscalers. It has the native Unreal Engine 5 upscaler known as TSR. So that would be available to all graphics cards, no matter how old they are. As long as they can handle Unreal Engine 5, they can leverage TSR. If they're newer graphics cards that have machine learning capabilities, or I guess not even necessarily machine learning capabilities, but if they're like RTX 20 series or newer, they can support NVIDIA DLSS, and then Intel XeSS is available as an alternative to TSR for everyone else. So no FSR support. So really, really interesting choice there. I'm not sure why it's not there, but it's not really necessary because as you'll see, I mean, it's a little bit of a bummer though, because I think this is a game that could definitely have benefited from FSR 4 for the Radeon 9000 series, for example, like a 9070 or 9070 XT. But TSR is basically good enough. Intel XeSS is also good enough. So let's go ahead and look at, well, let's look at the screenshots first. Let's look at some side by side. So, well, let's look at the, are these screenshots? Okay, these screenshots are not very spoilery. So, okay. So let's go ahead and look at the graphics settings. Okay, you can see here, it has, let me zoom in a bit more. There we go. So it has all the way up to the Epic preset. The scaling types, like I said, are either going to be DLSS, TSR, or XeSS. And then scaling mode can be either native, anti-aliasing, or all the way down to, I believe, ultra performance. Resolution scale, if you set it to custom on TSR, you can manually slide the resolution scale to something you want. But you cannot do this for DLSS or XeSS. If you want to tune a custom resolution upscale, you must be using the native TSR. So max FPS can either be unlimited, or I think it can be all the way down to like 30 FPS. VSync, display mode are there, your active monitors, your screen resolution, all that stuff. So for image, gamma, contrast, brightness, post-processing, all the post-processing things that essentially killed off multi-GPU technology are here. So motion blur, yes, that's right. If a game supports motion blur, it cannot do crossfire or SLI. Film grain, chromatic aberration, all of these break compatibility of multi-GPU, so this game cannot support multiple graphics cards. And then rendering, anti-aliasing, shadows, global illumination. Global illumination is handled by Lumen, which is the Unreal Engine 5's software-based ray tracing. And then it has reflections. Nanite is also used for the textures. So if you're setting the textures to high or above, it's going to leverage Nanite for better looking tessellated, like rock formations, for example, and that sort of thing. And then you have visual effects, foliage, and shading. So yeah, they go over basically all the things that we just mentioned. And then this was their test setup. So they're using a Ryzen 7 9800X3D to eliminate all CPU bottlenecks. The MSI X870E Carbon Wi-Fi, so a modern motherboard. And they enable resizable bar for all GPUs. Like this, I mean, it's nice that they mention this, but my assumption is that you always have this on no matter what, regardless of what you're using, unless your computer is just like, I don't know, 10 years old or something. So memory, they're using 32 gigabytes at DDR5-6200 in a 1-to-1 ratio at CL28, so that is pretty high end. And then the Arctic Freezer 3 for the CPU, but it's only a 280 AIO, but that doesn't really matter for the CPU. The Arctic M6, okay. 4 terabyte NVMe SSD, although they do not tell you what generation this is. I assume it's going to be PCI Gen 4, but it could be Gen 3 or Gen 5. That shouldn't really matter too much in this game, from my experience. Power supply, 1000 watt. Windows 11. Virtualization-based security is enabled. So this does actually nerf performance a little bit, just FYI. And then you have the drivers. So, okay, they're using all reference design graphics cards, so that means these are stock performance numbers. There is no overclocking on the GPUs. Everything is stock out of the box. And I actually agree with that testing methodology. If I was going to do a similar video or a similar comparison with GPUs, I always test reference spec. I do not show overclock results when comparing multiple graphics cards. If we want to look at overclocking results, we would look at that in a separate video that is only specific to a given GPU. I think that's the correct approach. Because the reason why we do this is because not everyone cares about overclocking. Very few people actually even bother to overclock. Most people are just going to buy a graphics card, install it, and they're just going to start playing games. They're not going to do anything with the BIOS. They're not going to do anything with power limits or Afterburner or any of that stuff. So you'd be surprised, but a lot of my audience, I understand, are tech enthusiasts, but the average gamer does not do any overclocking. So next, image quality. So here we have, on the left, they have epic settings. So this is the highest fidelity image. And then they have the lowest settings, which is the lowest settings. You can see the main thing that immediately stands out is the volumetric fog and the foliage density is definitely different. Surprisingly, the texture of the rocks in the background doesn't look that different at all. So that's interesting. If we look at high versus epic, you can see the foliage density on epic is more than on high. But I would say in terms of visuals, you're not missing a lot by going from epic to high, but you are gaining like 30 frames per second on average. So that is something to be aware. So if you're someone who, for example, if you're trying to play this game at 4K and you're having a hard time reaching 60 FPS on epic settings, you can always drop to high and you're probably going to be over 60 at that point because it's not really, like, the visuals don't really change that much. Let's look at the city here. So the lowest settings versus the highest settings. I can see in this scene the shading, so the shadows is definitely higher fidelity on epic versus low. But I like to look at high versus epic because epic typically, the highest settings don't really buy you that much more in terms of visual quality compared to high settings. That's often the case. And here I can still see the reflection. There's a little bit of, you can see there's some water on the rocks, on the stones here, on the pavement. And you can see how there's like no difference between high and epic there. It's just time of day difference there in terms of lighting. But yeah, the shadow density for the NPCs between high and epic look about the same. And you're gaining about 20 frames per second in the city by dropping from epic to high. So that is, that's really good actually. So this is definitely one of the better running games that's Unreal Engine 5 based. It is a single player game, so its performance is a lot more predictable than, say, a multiplayer game like Monster Hunter Wilds, for instance, although that's not a UE5 game. I guess Lords of the Fallen would be a good one to compare this to, because both Lords of the Fallen and Expedition 33 were both developed by relatively small teams that don't have like a big name behind them. And they're both leveraging Unreal Engine 5 to make their games. One of them has multiplayer components, though, and one of them is a single-player game. And you can see the difference in the performance here. So here's the underwater level. And one thing that stands out on Epic, you can definitely get a better sense of the fog, volumetric fog, and the depth of field looks a lot better on Epic versus on low. Low looks like everything is more muted. The overall object density is much, much lower. Look at the seaweed in the background on low. There's like very little seaweed. And then here it's like all filled in. So if we go to high settings, so again, we're talking like 30 FPS improvement, and you're not really losing a whole lot. So I think most people are probably going to be running this game on like high settings. All right, let's look at the performance numbers. Okay, for 1080p to get 60 frames per second, you will need, at minimum, you will need a RX 7800 XT, but that is literally just over the line, and the 4070 is just under the line. So these two are almost exactly the same in terms of their average performance, although the 7800 XT is doing a tiny bit better. It just manages to cross over the 60 FPS line. But what that means is that oftentimes both of these GPUs are going to dip under 60 quite often when you're playing it on epic settings. These are epic settings. So this is the highest graphic settings. So the good news is that if you have like a 7800 XT or an RTX 4070, for example, you can get like 90 plus frames per second, or at the very least like 80, 85 frames per second or better average if you're playing the game on high settings, or if you're leveraging DLSS or TSR. So that is something to keep in mind. So it seems like to me it looks like it's hard to run at first glance, but you have to remember this is Epic settings. So Epic settings UE5 is very, very challenging for most graphics cards that are designed for 1080p resolution. So it's almost like, well, do you need to like oversize your GPU? Not really, because you don't have to play the game on Epic settings. And you'll see as we go up in resolution, it just gets even harder to run. What's interesting is the RTX 3080, which has always been a very popular graphics card. This card cannot, I mean, it's 58 frames per second at 1080p. And the RTX 3080 has long been considered a 1440p graphics card. But here is another example of a modern game pushing graphics technology to the next level. So it is showing that the mighty 3080 is no longer that good of a graphics card, because it can't even do 60 at 1080p as an average in a brand new game. So that's just something to keep in mind, because the developers say that the recommended graphics card is an RTX 3070 or a Radeon 6800 XT. I think the developers made a mistake here, because the 6800 XT is typically the same as an RTX 3080. So I really think they meant to say RTX 3080 here, because the 3070 is a whole like 2 levels down compared to a 6800 XT. And when you go back to these results, the 3070 is only getting 45 frames per second. And the 6800 XT is kind of like, well, it's basically like a 3080. So you would say like 6800 XT is probably like 59 to 60, just like the 7800 XT and the 3080. So I really think they kind of made a mistake by labeling 3070 there for 1080p. And then you can see the entry level 4060 Ti is getting like 44, 45 frames per second. The 7600 XT is getting 36 frames. Intel's brand new Arc B580 is getting 35 frames per second. So even Intel's latest and greatest Battle Mage architecture is really struggling at 1080p in this game. So that is definitely a graphics card that will it will absolutely need to leverage upscaling to get playable frame rates in this game. And then even Intel's older last generation Alchemist, the A770, that one is less than 30 frames per second in this game. So cards like the 4060 and the 7600 8GB, these cards are not aging well at all. You're starting to see them like fall off, and they're literally only like 2 years old. So that's pretty sad. The 5060 Ti, for some reason, both 8 and 16 gigabyte doesn't really matter. Both of them, according to Tech Power Up, they had issues crashing. Now, I am not aware of issues with the 50 series graphics cards with this particular game. However, I am very aware of issues with Monster Hunter Wilds. If you look on Steam forums, there are a whole bunch of people complaining on the Monster Hunter Wilds Steam forums, complaining about RTX 5060 Ti crashing in Monster Hunter Wilds. So I don't know what's going on with that graphics card, but apparently it's crashing in Clair Obscur as well. So they have no results for the 5060 Ti for this game. It completely failed the test, even at 1080p. So You're saying the driver is a problem? So 576.28 driver is crashing the game? Did NVIDIA state in the release notes that that's a known issue? Because if NVIDIA is not acknowledging it, I don't know. I mean, I'm not like disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, did NVIDIA acknowledge the problem? 4090 only uses 566.36 since new drivers have performance loss and more driver issues. Yeah, what's up with NVIDIA's drivers, man? Like, it's funny because it's like everyone used to complain about AMD. I mean, I myself have been using AMD graphics cards for years and years, and I've never had any quote-unquote driver issues. We're literally streaming on an AMD graphics card right now, and we don't have any issues. So I'm literally using the AMD cards professionally, and here we have people complaining about NVIDIA graphics cards crashing in games like all over the place. So I don't know what's going on. Tables, it definitely sounds like tables have turned, although I never really knew there was any problems on either side to begin with. People who updated their driver on the latest keep on crashing Monster Hunter Wilds. Dude, I don't know what's going on. I guess NVIDIA doesn't care about, like, games. They're all in on AI. Everything I hear about NVIDIA is all, like, AI focused now. They're basically an AI company. They're even trying to, like, rename GTC to, like, AI. It's, like, something AI conference now. Or it's like, it's weird. It's weird. Like, it's crazy. But anyway, we'll talk about that maybe later in the stream if we have nothing else to talk about. But let's get through these results. So for 1440p, this is native 1440p. Epic settings. This is fully maxed out settings. The RTX 5090, a currently $3,000 plus graphics card, which basically makes it completely irrelevant. 95 frames per second. $3,000 for 95 frames per second at 1440p. Not even 4K. Not even 4K. 95 frames per second on a $3,000 plus graphics card. This is why nobody is interested in computer hardware right now, and I've noticed that the view count on a lot of, not just my channel's tech videos, but like across the board, I've noticed that there's a lack of interest in PC hardware in the last couple of weeks. And it's because you can't buy anything at proper prices unless you're buying, I don't know, like the CPU. Like the CPUs are normal priced, but like everything else is messed up. GPUs are impossible to buy. So it's like, yeah, but anyway, $3,000 gets you 95 frames per second. The latest and greatest technology in graphics, the most expensive graphics card gets you 95 frames per second in Expedition 33. And this is not a poorly optimized game. This is a very well-made game, considering the size of the development team and considering Unreal Engine 5. This is actually one of the better running Unreal Engine 5 games. And a $3,000 graphics card gets you 95 frames per second at 1440p. A measly 1440p. This isn't even 4K. So when you guys see the 4K results, it's going to be shocking. The 4090, 71.5 frames per second. The 5080, this is like what, $1,700 to $2,000 for just over 60 frames per second with only 16 gigabytes of VRAM. Terrible value. 4080 Super doesn't. It's under 60. All the AMD cards under 60 at 1440p. The newly released 5070 Ti under 60 frames per second. So, like, none of these GPUs. The only GPUs that can achieve above 60 frames per second is the 5080, the 4090, and the 5090. And of those three, the 5080 oftentimes dips under 60. This is the reason why I don't recommend the 5080. The 5080 is terrible value. It's nearly $2,000 for a puny 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's barely able to go above 60 frames per second at 1440p. Terrible value. This is why the 50 series is a complete and utter failure. Complete, utter failure of a hardware generation. When the latest and greatest costs at least $1,700, only gives you 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and can barely stay above 60 frames per second at 1440p in a brand new game made by like 30 people. And to make it even better, this game, what we're looking at might actually be Game of the Year. We are literally possibly looking at Game of the Year. And the 5080 is barely able to keep up, just stay afloat, tread water above 60 frames in a potential Game of the Year candidate at 1440p. Now do you guys see why the 50 series is utter garbage and a complete failure? Complete and utter failure. So, the 4090, it's like, okay, the 4090, if you want a 5080 today, you have to spend like the same amount of money that someone would have spent on a 4090 like 2 years ago. But the 4090 is like 2.5 years old, and it's still holding up pretty good. So it's like, whoa, not sure what's going on there. All right, so you guys can see, like, this screams that this game is going to require upscalers. $50 series bad 2025 product award. It might end up on that Gamers Nexus video. You know what I'm saying? 50 series might end up in the Gamers Nexus PC, like, worst PC build of the year. I can see it now. I can see it now. You know how it is, man. Burnt power connectors on 5090, black screen issues, driver issues, triangular DLSS artifacting issues in Monster Hunter Wilds. You know, driver regression problems. You gotta like downgrade your driver to get a stable experience. Like, there's more than that, but you know, I'm just giving you guys the tip of the iceberg here. Like, there's a lot of problems. A lot of problems. So it's like, yeah, dude, that 50 series is complete. Oh boy. So anyway, let's look at 4K here. So actually, hold on, let's look at some of these. So for 60, yeah, so those are the only ones. So these other ones, like basically what I call, like all of these last gen cards and the new AMD cards, these guys, they basically got to play the game on like high settings. It's like drop to high, and it's like all of a sudden you're at like 90 frames. So it's like, it's an easy problem to solve, but it's one of those things like, wow, dude, like we really are hitting the limits of silicon technology, or games are, software is scaling much faster than hardware is able to keep up. It's like hardware is not able to keep up, but the software just keeps getting more and more demanding. That's what this is showing. So, yeah, there's not really much more to say here. I guess what I like to look at are older GPUs. So, like, for example, the 7900 XT and the 3090 Ti and the 4070 Ti and the 4070 Ti Super, all four of these graphics cards are typically always about the same. And you guys can see here, they're all kind of like in that same, like somewhere between like 45 and 50 frames per second. So, you know, they're all kind of there. And then the lower end cards from that, so you got like the 4070 Super, the GRE, the 7800 XT, the 3080, the 6800 XT. These guys are all in that like 40 to 45 frames per second bracket. Then you have like your 30 FPS average and plus, so that would be like the 5060 Ti, which hilariously, the 5060 Ti worked at 1440, but it like failed at 1080p. At least the 16 gigabyte card made it. It looks like the 5070 somehow failed at 1440, and the 5060 Ti 8 gig failed at 1440. That's interesting. So apparently, it doesn't just affect the 5060 Ti. It looks like the 5070 also is having a problem. So with this game. And then you guys can see Intel's B580 is managing 23 frames per second. So right there, I mean, I kind of was saying this at the beginning of the year when I got the B580. It's basically an Intel 7600 XT. Like, you guys can see the 7600 XT and the B580, they kind of trade blows. They're basically they're 1 FPS of each other. In the 1080p results, the 7600 XT was 1 frame faster. And in 1440p, the B580 is 1 frame per second faster, but they're basically the same. The only difference is AMD's card gives you 4 more gigabytes of VRAM. So you got 16 gigs of VRAM versus 12 on the Intel. So technically, the AMD one is a more reliable choice for a gamer, but the Intel one is probably more niche and more interesting to play around with if you're an enthusiast. And then you have the 4060 and all the other lower end cards. You have the Intel's Alchemist is down here. So, yeah. Okay, 4K, here we go. This is the eye opener. This is the big one. 4K, max settings. This is all Epic preset. Fully maxed out. 2160p. Native 4K resolution. There is only one graphics card that can manage to stay above 60 frames per second, and that graphics card is the $3,000 plus 5090 600 watt Fire Hazard. That's the only graphics card. So basically, the most irrelevant graphics card is the only one that can handle 4K native on Epic settings in a potential game of the year. Crazy stuff. If that doesn't scream hardware stagnation, I don't know how better to describe it. Because 50 series literally just launched this year. And the most expensive option is only able to do 78 frames per second in a brand new game that just came out like a week ago. And it costs $3,000. And you can't even buy one. So it's like, even if you wanted to, it's like, where are you going to buy one? So it's crazy. So anyway, everything else, including the once mighty 4090, is sub 60 frames per second. Now, I've been considering showcasing my RTX 4090 in this game at 4K just to show that these results are accurate. But I have tested Expedition 33 with my RTX 4090 Founders Edition reference card from Best Buy, and I can confirm that I am getting about the same 57 frames per second at 4K resolution with the 4090. So these are definitely accurate results. I have also tested the game. In fact, you have seen me live streaming the game with the new 9070 XT, and I can confirm these results are basically the same as my own results. So Tech Power Up is spot on. These are 100% accurate results. So I get about 43 to 45 frames per second at 4K native with the 9070 XT, and I got about 56, 57 frames per second with the Founders Edition 4090. So this is definitely accurate. Now, I haven't tested with other graphics cards, so I've been meaning to test this game with the XTX, but when I saw that it was only basically like 44 frames per second, to me, it's basically the same as the 9070 XT, so it's like not really worth bothering. But I don't know, maybe I should test with some of these other ones, but knowing what I know, like the 9070 XT results are 100% accurate. The 4090 results are 100% accurate based off of my own testing. So I don't see the point in testing like these other cards because, Tech Power Up's already done the work. So, but this shows that this is a game that definitely needs upscalers to get playable frame rates if you're someone who has for example, like myself, a 4K OLED display and you want to experience the game with the highest fidelity and the highest resolution, output resolution that is, with modern hardware. So, Yeah, these results are very interesting. So for 30 frames per second, for that 30 FPS console quality experience, you would need a RTX 3080. The RTX 3080 manages 30 frames per second at 4K with this game. Very interesting results. What's really interesting here is the AMD, some of these AMD cards were performing better at the lower resolutions. Like if we look here, like 1080p, the 6900 XT was 60 frames, the 3080 was 58 frames. But you come down here to 4K, and now the 3080 is actually beating, well, okay, it's like 1 frame, but it's slightly above the 7800 XT and the 6900 XT. That's really interesting to see. So Ampere's brute force hardware is able to like push, it's able to punch above its weight at these higher resolutions, like 4K. So, and then like, you know, all these low end cards just, they don't even make it. And again, the 5060 Ti somehow just didn't make it. So that is yeah. And this is a really good game, guys. Like this is not an unoptimized game. This is a very well optimized game for what it is. This game alone is worth the 5090. Yeah, dude, we're probably looking at a game of the year. Currently, this is my game of the year. Until I play something that is better than this, so far, I'm convinced Expedition 33 is game of the year 2025. Well, no, what he's saying is when he plays Monster Hunter Wilds with the RTX 5090, the 5090 is using 28 gigabytes of VRAM out of the 32 gigabytes available. Yeah, no, that's accurate. Because, so I have seen, so even with the 4090 and the 7900 XTX, both of those graphics cards have 24 gigabytes of VRAM. I can see the game pulling like 21 gigabytes of VRAM, 22 gigabytes of VRAM with the XTX. So let's look at some upscaled results, because it's pretty obvious that we're going to need upscalers for this game. So let's see how this game performs with upscaling. Okay, 1080p, the only ones that really matter here are those that were having trouble before. So if you're playing the game at 1080p, and if you're on like a 3080, for example, although most people that are on 3080s are probably on 1440p, so this is not really relevant for them. I think the people who this is mostly relevant for are the people who are on like Intel, like a B580 or something like a 7600 XT or a 7700 XT. So these cards can, with upscaling, at 1080p they can get above 60. But keep in mind though, this is, you're taking like a sub 1080p resolution and you're upscaling to 1080p. So usually the results of upscaling to 1080p output is not ideal. Meaning, you're not going to get as good of an image if you're upscaling to achieve a playable frame rate at 1080p versus if you're trying to play the game at a higher resolution, like 4K, for example. Because the more pixels the graphics card has to work with, or I guess the upscaler algorithm has to work with, the better the results of the upscale. So if you're upscaling from like, I don't know, 720p to 1080p, the final result will not look that good because 720p just doesn't have that many pixels to provide a good enough sample of data for the algorithm being either DLSS or TSR or XeSS. This game doesn't have FSR, but you get what I'm saying. To provide a proper, good-looking output image, like an upscaled image. So that's the reason why I personally don't recommend upscaling to 1080p, because the 1080p results that are upscaled to achieve 1080p doesn't really look good. It never looks good. It doesn't matter what upscaler, even DLSS doesn't look that good when you're trying to get an output at 1080p. So it's just because there's just not enough detail in the individual pixels at that low resolution. So unfortunately, the only one here that is, well, okay, the 4060, I guess the 4060, 59, so it's almost there. The 3060 and the Intel Arc A770, complete and utter failure. They both can't get 60, which is kind of like the benchmark. Basically, the baseline is you got to get 60 frames per second at 1080p. If you can't do 60 FPS at 1080p, the GPU is a complete and utter failure for a game like this. Like, you shouldn't need like an insane amount of like sacrificing on settings if you're using upscaling. So A770, 3060, complete failures. All the others here, though, like they can get 60 with upscale, so that's fine. 1440p, this is what people are probably interested in. So we'll go up to 5080 for this one. So the good news is that a lot of the GPUs can get very playable frame rates at 1440p with upscaling. And this is okay. I feel like a lot of people are going to play the game with 1440p as the target resolution, so they'll use some form of upscaling, whether it's like quality preset or whatever. So Tech Power Up did quality upscale, so I don't know what this resolution is, like the internal resolution when you're doing a 1440p output. I have no idea what that actual resolution is, but this is an okay result. So for most people, even people on 3080, the 3080, most people that have 3080 are on 1440p. So this is good news because this means they can use DLSS and they can get a 65, 66 frame per second average while still playing on epic settings. So if they want to make it even better, they can just drop to like high settings and then they're at, you know, like 90 frames per second or whatever. So very, very playable. And this is why this game is mostly a well-optimized Unreal Engine 5 game. We've seen a whole lot worse with older UE5 titles, namely Immortals of Avium and Lords of the Fallen were like significantly harder to run than this. All right, then finally 4K. So here, 4K Epic is very hard to run. Now this is basically 1440p upscaled to 4K. So whenever you see quality and the output is 2160p, that basically means 1440p. So all of these are very similar to the 1440p native results. So you can see here a bunch of cards are able to hit 60. The 4080 is very, very close. The 7900 XTX, the 9070 XT, they're above that line. The 5080 is above that line. So yeah, I mean, this is, you know, all these other ones though, like they're going to have to sacrifice on some level of settings, and they're probably best off running the game at high settings and then leaving the quality preset on the upscaler, because 1440 to 4K is actually the best use case for upscaling that I have seen. 3090 Ti, yeah, 3090 Ti, man, you know, it's, yeah, that's struggling. 3090 Ti is stuck there between the two 4070 Tis. So that's funny. It's like wedged between the two of them. It can't get out, you know, and its rival, the 7900 XT, just stands like on top of them. So anyway, that's hilarious. But okay, so none of these guys are like 4K cards though in this day and age. So it's like whatever. Yeah. And you got 3 NVIDIA cards at the bottom that all crashed and they didn't make it. So you got the 5070, it didn't make it, and both 5060 Tis all failed. Interesting. So technically, the 3060 can't say it was the worst one because the 50 series cards, there was 3 of them that did a lot worse. They just straight up failed. So, okay. So those are the overall results. Let's just kind of look at their conclusion, or let's look at the VRAM usage next. So VRAM usage. The good news is that this game, if you have a 8 gigabyte graphics card and you're playing the game at 1080p resolution, 8 gigabytes and this game is still good in 2025, provided you're playing at 1080p. So even on the highest graphics settings, 1080p only needs about 7 gigabytes of VRAM. So that shows this is a pretty well optimized game, all things considered, considering it's Unreal Engine 5. So, and they're using the RTX 5090 as the test because the more VRAM you have, the less the compression happens. Meaning, if you have a really big VRAM pool, the game tends to allocate more memory than it actually needs. So this is kind of like worst case scenario here. So you can see that even at 4K resolution, the game is only pulling 8.5 gigs of VRAM. So that means old cards like the 10 gigabyte 3080 aren't going to have a huge problem with VRAM limits in this game, considering those are epic settings. Those are like the highest settings. So, and you can see the difference between low. So low 4K uses about the same amount of VRAM as like 900p epic. So that's really interesting. Or I guess it uses about the same exact VRAM amount as 1080p epic. So this is actually quite good. So the conclusion, let's see, what do they say? They're saying a bunch of stuff about the actual game itself. But basically, if you like JRPGs, turn-based with QTEs, deck building like Final Fantasy VII, deck building like, what does it mean by that? Sprinkled with some puzzles and exploration, including platforming, like a Mario game. You know what I'm saying? Like the Super Mario games. So even the guy who benchmarked the GPUs. Now, if you're just sitting there benchmarking GPUs, you're not really like experiencing the story and the game and stuff. You're just kind of like playing through the same area over and over again. But even that guy, with all the repetition of testing 33 graphics cards at 3 different resolutions each, this individual is saying so far this is the best RPG of 2025. Yeah, so that's the same thing that I was noticing. So built on Unreal Engine 5, graphics look excellent, characters are well animated, especially in cutscenes. Yeah, I know, man. The motion capture for the facial animation in this game is like next generation. Like, it's so good. It's so good. The only thing that kind of betrays it is the fact that the motion capture animation was only done for the French voice actors, so they don't have the English voice actors. This game only has two dubs. It has the French dub, which is the original dub, because it's made by French developers, and then the English dub for the international audience, but there's no other audio dubs. But the facial animation is done for the French dub. But what would have made this a perfect 10 was if they added like the lip syncing for the English voice acting. That would have just been like, man, that literally would have been the final going above and beyond. You know what I'm saying? So that plus like manual saves would have made this like a perfect 10 in my mind. Otherwise, this is easily a 9 out of 10. What is super distracting though is they're applying some sort of sharpening filter. Yeah, I know what he means, because in the overworld there is some kind of dithering effect that's happening. I'm pretty sure Digital Foundry is going to do a video about this game. They've already done one for the consoles that went up today, but they're probably going to look into this because there's some sort of dithering effect that I haven't really seen in Unreal Engine 5 games that much, but I have seen in like old school, like Final Fantasy 13, which has nothing to do with Unreal Engine, but that game had a sharpening filter that it was using. So it's funny how this game it's paying homage to those older games, but it even has like a similar kind of dithering sharpening filter that those older games had, which is kind of strange. But yeah, those are post-processing effects. If you turn those off, you won't see that. Same thing with the motion blur. So shader stutter, accessibility, upscaling, and ray tracing. So the game, like I said earlier, the game doesn't do hardware ray tracing. It has lumen for reflections and global illumination. So it's using software-based ray trace reflections and the GI, and then it has nanite for the geometry, so the tessellation, the textures, the stuff in the environment, essentially. So that's pretty much it. For a small team of like 30 people, I mean, that is pretty incredible that they were able to do all of that. And they basically say what we just said in terms of the... He does say that depending on the location, the game can sometimes be a bit CPU limited, especially with weaker CPUs. But I think this could be this statement could be expanded upon more with like a CPU benchmark comparison. But considering the game is relatively it's a relatively linear game. There's not a lot of NPCs on the screen. The only area that I can think of where you would see a CPU bottleneck, well, if I can even say bottleneck, would probably be in the prologue, where the game starts out in a large city and there's a ton of NPCs on the screen. That's the only point in the game. Maybe at the end of the game as well, because there's a lot of NPCs at the end of the game. But those two, the train station... the train... Oh, you mean... Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The Monaco station? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't have that many NPCs, though. It does have more than normal, but it's nothing like the prologue. The prologue has a whole bunch of NPCs. It has NPCs that you can't talk to, and then it has NPCs that you can talk to. So, and it's got ones in the background that you can't even like go up to. So, I think the prologue could be where you would see a CPU bottleneck, especially if it's an older CPU, like I don't know, like Zen 2 or something. Okay, so here they talk about the Blackwell crashing. So quite unexpectedly, some Blackwell GPUs kept crashing during map loading. It doesn't look like a memory issue because both 8 and gigabyte models were affected. What does help sometimes is loading the game at low settings, low resolution, and once loaded, restore the desired settings. That is very interesting that this issue affects the Blackwell, the 50 series GPUs. That's interesting. So AMD results are very interesting, especially at low resolution. They're performing extremely well. I don't agree with this statement, though, about the 7900 XTX matching the 4080 is rare. Like, this is rare doesn't make any sense to me, considering those two GPUs are pretty much always rivals. And then VRAM. Not really a problem. You only really need 8 or 10 gigabytes for maximum settings, as long as you don't run at 4K. But even 4K, it's, like, even 12 gigabyte GPUs can get by. They'll have to use a lot of upscaling, though. So, okay, well, that is a look at Expedition 33. Definitely check this game out. We will be live streaming this game. I still have, like, 3 major areas to go to minimum before I finish the game. Including, well, that doesn't even include the final zone. So that's like 4 areas. And then there's a bunch of other areas that you can explore manually on your own, outside of the optional / mandatory ones. So, yeah, this game is jam-packed with a bunch of stuff. It's really, really good. And that's pretty much all I've been playing since it came out, is just Expedition 33. The only other game I have also been playing, Monster Hunter Wilds, just because of the event quest that I was telling you guys about at the beginning of the stream. So Arch-Tempered Radar, if you follow this game and you haven't been paying attention, do log in, do the Arch-Tempered Radar hunt. It's very fun. It is definitely one of the more challenging fights. Surprisingly, it was not as hard as I thought it would be. It's interesting. The Monster Hunter community right now is kind of ranking, in terms of difficulty of the hunts, Arch-Tempered Raidao is somewhere between... It's like Gormagala... Like, Tempered Gormagala is still the one that you see the most people carding to. And then Zoshia can also be very hit or miss if you're playing multiplayer. I think if you're soloing, Zoshia is not really that hard once you understand the fight, because it has very specific mechanics. And the tempo of the fight is slower than the Raidao fight or even the Gormagala fight. So, I don't know. Like, if I had to rank them in terms of difficulty, I'm just thinking, like, in terms of solo, I would say Zoshia is more of like a marathon fight more than anything. Meaning it's a long hunt. It's just a long hunt. Like, it just, I don't know. Because it has so much HP. It has multiple phases. You know, it's not going to run away from you, but it's going to transition into specific phases. So that one has its own set of challenges when you're doing it solo. Arch-Tempered Raidao is definitely faster. Definitely can one-shot you a lot quicker when you least expect it because of all the lightning spam compared to Zoshia. Although Zoshia does have some really broken moves, like the fire thing in phase 2 to phase 3, where it basically like puts fire everywhere except behind it. And if you're not behind it, you basically have to Farcaster out because there's like no way out of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, anyone who fought Zoshia knows what I'm talking about. So it has some kind of nonsense mechanics like that. That Raidao doesn't really do any of that stuff. But Raidao is much faster, flies around a lot, and can kind of be a nuisance to fight repeatedly. Gormagala is just super annoying. And the main reason why I think people consider Gormagala really hard is because Gormagala is immune to Flash. So you can't use Flash on Gormagala. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people have trouble with it. And multiplayer, a lot of people for some reason just cart to it. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why. Like, I'll join a random SOS and I'll see people cart to Gormagala more frequently than Zoshia. Which I don't understand why, considering Gormagala was in the game since launch. But maybe it's because Gormagala can randomly, like, change targets, and just, if someone's not topped up, like, and if they're like an archer or something and they're out of stamina so they can't do the dodge. I've seen archers get punched in the face by Gormagala and they're at like 40% HP. They get punched in the face and they die when he's enraged. Like, I see that happen, like, a lot. So, or anyone who can't block. Like, anyone who doesn't have a shield. You know, like, dual blades doing, like, demon thing, and then they get punched in the face by Gormagala. It's like, those type of hunters, they get carded all the time to Gormagala. So maybe that's why Gormagala is right up there with, like, Arch-Tempered Raidao. But, anyway. So that's more like Monster Hunter news. But yeah, these are pretty much the only games that I've been playing recently. Monster Hunter Wilds and Expedition 33. Almost everything. Oh, Gormagala does as an AoE, so even if you... Oh, that is true. All that frenzy stuff on the ground. Yeah, you take a bunch of chip damage, I notice, against... Well, not really chip damage, but like dot damage, I guess. If you get the frenzied effect, and it keeps building up. So, yeah, I don't know. That one, for some reason, like, SOS, joining multiplayer for Gormagala is so... You never know what's going to happen. Let's put it that way. Although, Arch-Tempered Raidao, it's funny because it's like people are complaining, oh, the game is so easy, the game is so easy. Okay, well, if the game is so easy... Why are people constantly carding to Gormagala, and then they're also carding to Zoshia on occasion? Although you don't see it that much anymore, because I think people... Zoshia, because it's such a telegraphed fight, you kind of know the phases by now, you know? So it's like, I feel like that one is pretty straightforward, but it's a long hunt, but it's predictable. And then Raidao, Arch-Tempered Raidao, this is one where if someone runs in with like negative 15 lightning resist and they don't have a shield and they just think they can just spam attacks the whole time as like a longsword user or a dual blades user or a bow user or a light bow gun user, which you barely ever see. But I mean, I've been doing a bunch of these hunts, these Arch Temper Raid Out hunts recently, and I have seen a bunch of people just try to like DPS burn it down, and they don't worry about their health bar, and they just get one shot when he does the big high in the sky slam down, and then he does the big lightning shock, and then they just get, they basically get disintegrated right there in front of me. Because I've been doing these hunts with the Lance. I've been going in as a tank, essentially, against Arch-Tempered Raidao, and man, I'm taking all the hits, all those lightning hits. I go into like the super guard mode, and I have offensive guard and all the counterattack stuff. It's funny because like when Raidao tries to like do his 4-hit combo, the wing melee, the chomp, the other wing, and the chomp and the wings, and then he goes to electric. When he does that and on me with the lance, because I just hold guard, every one of those hits, assuming the angle is set up correctly, I counter every single one of those hits. So it's like he tries to do the left hook with the wing, he takes 35 damage. He does the right wing, he takes 40 damage. He does the headbutt, he takes 45 damage. He tries to do the lightning strike, he takes 35 damage. So it's like it's so cool because it's like I feel like I'm playing Expedition 33 and pairing all of Arch Temper Raidao's moves with the lance, because it's like ting boom, ting boom, ting. It's like I'm just doing damage to him when it's his turn to attack. It's hilarious. But yeah, I try to just tank. I just try to tank him because I don't want people carding to him. So occasionally you'll get into those groups where someone has wide range and they're like playing as a support, which is really, really good. I think more people need to do that if they're playing with randoms. That's kind of like a pro tip. If you're going to join an SOS and you notice that there's a bunch of guys who don't have shields, you probably want to bring wide range. So for any of these, for Zoshia, for this, for Gormagal, all of them. But anyway, we'll probably take a look at and show you guys what I mean by this tomorrow on the live stream, or at least a little bit on the weekend stream. So anyway, let's move on to what's the next article here. Do we want to keep talking about Oblivion and Expedition? So how many of you guys have been playing Oblivion? Here, let's do a poll. Let's start a poll. I'm curious about how many people have been playing Oblivion. Should it be a poll? Yeah. Start a poll. Have you been playing Oblivion Remastered? So let's see. Let's see how many people have been playing Oblivion's remastered version. Okay, so some people have. So we have like 35 concurrent viewers. I would like to get at least like 10 votes. 7 votes, and currently it's like 71% no and 29% yes. Which means not a lot of people have been playing Oblivion Remastered. So I don't know. Well, I know what the follow-up question will be. Okay, we got 10 votes, 11 votes, okay. So let's end the poll. So it looks like 81% of you have not been playing the Oblivion Remaster, and only 18% say yes. So of those of you who have been playing it, what are your opinions on it? Like, what do you guys think of the Oblivion Remaster? I myself have not been playing it, so that's why I'm very curious to know what the average person that has been playing it thinks of it. Because I haven't been playing it at all. I've been too busy with Clair Obscure Expedition 33. And one of the game reviewers said a very interesting statement in a podcast recently. he said that it was similar to what we're talking about right now. We're about to talk about Oblivion and Expedition 33. He said that there's two great role-playing games to play right now that just came out together. But he said, but of those two games, because it was a similar discussion. There was like four people talking, and they were kind of discussing like, you know, Oblivion and the guild quests and that kind of thing, and then Expedition 33 and all that stuff. And the guy said, of the two games, only one of them is a Game of the Year candidate, in his opinion. So, as someone who has not played the Oblivion remaster, I can't comment on it because I'm not going to grade something if I haven't played it. But I can grade Expedition 33, and I totally think Expedition 33 is a Game of the Year contender. So I assume he was referring to Expedition 33. But what do you guys... So, HTZ says it's good. Like, how does it compare to the original? Like, what did they change... What did they change in it versus the original? Assuming you played the original. I think I know what my next... Alright, I'm putting up another poll. Which of the following Elder Scrolls games is your favorite? Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind, Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion, or the Elder Scrolls 5, Skyrim? The graphics, and now you can run. Oh, they added running? Okay, that right there is a huge improvement. That's a massive improvement. Okay, well, a lot of people are voting Skyrim so far. No one's voting Morrowind and Oblivion. It's interesting because a lot of people say that Oblivion is the one that they remember the most. They remember it the best. The one that had the jankiest, like, character dialogue sequences, I think, was Morrowind. But there was something about Morrowind that just seemed special. Maybe it's just nostalgia. But I don't know. When I think back to the olden days of the RPGs, I look at the 6th generation of consoles very favorably. And Morrowind was 6th gen. Oblivion was 7th gen. Skyrim was also 7th gen, strangely enough. It was close to the end of the 7th gen. It's interesting, Oblivion and Skyrim are both 7th gen. 7th gen was very long-lived, though. Wow, so, okay. Looks like nobody voted for Morrowind. Morrowind's the one that got the ray tracing, the path tracing update, didn't it? Didn't Nvidia or somebody add, like, full path tracing to Morrowind as, like, a mod? Didn't somebody do that? I could have sworn I saw, like, a tech demo of Morrowind with path tracing a while back. Because they were taking, like, old games, and they were trying to, like, show how you could breathe new life into old games with path tracing. Okay, well, it's 2 minutes are up, so 8 votes. Most people say Skyrim was their favorite. Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think Skyrim definitely stayed popular for a very, very long time, more so than the others. The fact Oblivion didn't have running really hurt it. Morrowind, Oblivion was the one that was like before Fallout 3, right? Or Fallout, yeah, was it Fallout 3? Or Fallout 2? Fallout changed the design of how Bethesda did a lot of their RPGs, though, and I think that's why Skyrim benefited from a lot of that, and Oblivion, unfortunately, was like the game that came before those changes. But in this article from WCCF Tech, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered's Shadow Drop actually helped Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, I remember a lot of people were saying that it was unfair of Microsoft to put both the Oblivion Remaster and Expedition 33 on Game Pass at the exact same time. And the argument was that, hey, this is a small studio that made a really good game, and you're kind of eclipsing them by putting this well-known classic Elder Scrolls game remastered version on Game Pass at the same time. So they were saying how, like, oh, Microsoft is screwing over Sandfall Entertainment by putting Oblivion on Game Pass the same day as Expedition 33's launch day. But it turns out that that didn't really matter too much, as this article suggests. I mean, it certainly didn't affect me. Like, I haven't even touched the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remaster, but I have played like 40 plus hours of Expedition 33 in the last week. But this leads me to my next and probably final poll. Have you played Expedition 33? So that will be the next, and probably the last poll question. Morrowind is the best. Fighting tempered mode. You mean Mitsutsune? Oh, for a second I thought you were saying you were fighting something in Morrowind. It's like, wait, what? Starfield is still a classic Bethesda game like Skyrim and the ones before. Yeah, it is, but it's sci-fi though. It's like, it's very different in terms of the scope. Essentially, it's the same style of game though. Okay, so we'll leave that one. I'll give it another minute there, but only 6 people voted. We had more votes on the Oblivion question. I'd like to get a similar vote count on Expedition 33, but so far it looks like the ratio of people that have played Expedition versus those who have played Oblivion Remaster looks like it's slightly higher. You're not really a fan of the setting of Clair Obscur. You prefer dark fantasy type games. Well, the setting is kind of like the Belle Epoque era of... So it's like... It's inspired by... What is that? Like late 19th century France, early 20th century France. So it's like after the Victorian era, or it's like similar to the Victorian era, so it's kind of like Bloodborne in that regard in terms of the setting. Okay, we got the same amount of votes, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. But yeah, it looks like, so we had 18% said yes for Oblivion. Here we have 36% said yes for Expedition 33. So it does seem like more people in this audience have played Expedition 33, which kind of means, it sort of proves this article is accurate, because it says here, so when Oblivion was finally revealed after weeks of leaks, many RPG fans began to worry for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Clair Obscur was a brand new RPG released just days after the Oblivion remaster. The concern was that Oblivion would swallow up all the attention from Clair Obscur. On the outside, it looked like Xbox had screwed Clair Obscur in a big way. That was not the case, as Clair Obscur surpassed 1 million copies sold. I think it took like 3 days to get it. It was like it sold 500,000 copies in day one, and then it had like, I think after the third day it was like at 1 million copies sold for a team of like 30 people. I mean, that is a success, and is one of the best rated games. Even the Metacritic scores on this game are really high. It's like, it's very rare to see a Metacritic score of like 90% plus. I think it was like 92 or 93% on Metacritic, and even like the Steam reviews, which are always overly negative for a lot of games, is like 90, I think 92% last I checked. So the game was successful. A report from the game business showed that not only did Clair Obscur not get swallowed up, but the two seemingly helped each other. Both games were available on Game Pass, so it's not a surprise that per Ampere analysis data, the majority of players for both Oblivion and Clair Obscur were Xbox players. What is interesting, though, is that 55% of players who played Clair Obscur on Xbox also played Oblivion. 35% of all Expedition players also played Oblivion. Wait, so what does that mean? So 55% of players on... What? So 55% of the players on Xbox that played Clair Obscur also played Oblivion? Okay, I don't see how this is a Venn diagram, because this is 35% of all Expedition 33 players. So that's like Steam and PlayStation and maybe Xbox included in there also played Oblivion? But what's the ratio going the other way? Like, I don't know. It's kind of... Anyway, showing huge overlap between the two. As Kepler Interactive's portfolio manager told the game business, I think it just drew attention. Yeah, I agree. Because I think like a lot of the game media outlets have been talking about both games. So it's like, if you are interested in one of them, maybe you'll become interested in the other one if you're someone who plays RPGs. I think that's kind of the idea. So, one of them is a Western RPG. The other one is actually a JRPG. It's interesting to see the difference. See, a lot of people don't understand, like, there is a distinction between a JRPG and a Western-style RPG. And what's interesting is Expedition 33, even though it's made by a Western developer, it is classified as a JRPG. It is very much a JRPG, even though it's not made by a Japanese developer. Meaning, a game development studio doesn't need to be a Japanese developer to create a JRPG. The JRPG has a very specific identity, we'll say, in terms of like how it is composed, like how the story unveils itself, how the characters are structured, how their interactions are structured, the world building, the pacing, all that kind of stuff. There's a certain way of doing it. And the other thing too is like Western style RPGs are told, the story is told through the choices the player makes. So they're more active in that regard. Whereas JRPGs are a lot more passive in terms of the person playing the game is kind of there along for the ride. It's like, here is a story. You're going to see how this story is played out from start to finish, and you're going to be taken along as part of the journey. You're going to experience the journey. And you may have some influence in some of the subplots, like the side quests and certain character interactions. But for the most part, it is a to Z bookended story where you don't have as much of an impact or as much of a role in shaping how the outcome of the game will turn out. So that is one of the major differences between a traditional Western style game, which the player does have a lot more control over how the story unfolds, over how your choices that you make are good or bad. Like, that's kind of like, you guys look at like Fable or The Witcher. You know, these are games where you can start going and killing You can start killing civilians in the town and creating like a bad, like a wanted, like Gerald to become a criminal, like that kind of thing. Like you have that kind of freedom in a Western RPG. Same thing with like Mass Effect. The voice dialogue options that you have will determine like how it's like a giant tree diagram in terms of like how your choices will shape the outcome. That is a very Western RPG mechanic. Like that's a lot of how its core structure is designed. JRPG, there's none of that. Most of the time, it is not like that at all. There is a predefined cast of characters. They're gonna do their thing. You're going to experience what they like, how the outcome is going to be shaped based off of their predetermined decision making, and it's like you're watching an interactive movie at that point. That's kind of like how JRPGs have always been. So that is the key difference in how they contrast from each other. So this game, Expedition 33, is definitely very much a JRPG. There is actually an interview. I think we talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it last Tech Thursdays, or maybe it was when I was streaming the game. But I'll just mention it again briefly. There was an interview by a Japanese media company. They interviewed the creative director of Expedition 33 from Sandfall Entertainment. So the French guy, I think his name is Guillaume Broche, and he was interviewed, and so was the guy at Square Enix who made Final Fantasy 15 and I think Final Fantasy 7, like the original Final Fantasy 7. The guy who did Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy Type 0, and Final Fantasy 15. That guy and Gilliam were both interviewed together by this Japanese company, and they were all saying how it's like, oh, like the headline of the title, I forget what it was, but it translates into English as something like French man creates Japanese role-playing game. It's like, but it's like all in Japanese. And it was a very insightful interview at looking at hearing how he went about constructing the game and how he was influenced through his childhood growing up playing JRPGs. And that's kind of what drove like this passion project on the side, because he used to work at Ubisoft, so he's an ex-Ubisoft developer. Most of the guys at Sandfall, that team is ex-Ubisoft developers, and they actually have a lot of junior developers, which is very surprising considering the quality of this game. So that just shows you, like, you don't need a massive budget or a AAA studio to create an epic game. Like, you literally just need people who are laser focused on the mission of what they want to do, the type of game they want to make, and they have full, complete freedom of realizing that vision. They don't have any corporate suits trying to tell them, oh, it needs to be, oh, you can't make the characters like this because that's not the colloquial way, or that's not the contemporary way that people behave or how people dress. You shouldn't make them look like, there's none of that. It's fully uncensored. They get to do what they want. They're going to make the characters look the way they want. They're going to make the characters be written the way they want with the original creative vision. And that's why they're able to create pretty much a game that I think is generation defining. So when I look back on the PlayStation 5 / Xbox Series X generation, so the 9th generation of gaming, which is the generation that we're currently in, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 will be one of the games that immediately comes to mind when I think back of this generation of games. This specific game is pretty much the touchstone of the PS5 generation. So it's the best example of a game that came out in this era that defines what the graphics fidelity of this era should look like, and how the games should run, and how they play, and they build off of the previous generation. It's just it's the whole complete package. So definitely check this game out. It is probably going to be a classic. It's right up there with games like Nier, with Kingdom Hearts, with Final Fantasy, Persona, a whole bunch of other games that have been genre defining and even generational defining when those games were new. So definitely check this game out. It's the fact that it's on Game Pass. I mean, if you have Game Pass, there's no reason not to download this game and try it out. Even if you don't think you like it, you should at least try it. That's all I'm going to say. So before I sound like a broken record. But yeah. People who are fans of RPGs, they're eating really good right now because there are 2 really good games that just came out. And one of them might be Game of the Year. So how about that? So let's, what is this article? Let's see. I have 2, wait, NVIDIA. Do we want to talk about NVIDIA again? Let's get this one out of the way real quick. So NVIDIA is reportedly working on GeForce RTX 5080 Super 24GB and RTX 5070 Super 18GB designs. So these are the ones that are going to salvage the terrible 50 series effectively. And the 5080 Super 24GB is the card that I kept telling you guys was the 5080 Ti. So it looks like they're probably not going to call it 5080 Ti, and instead they're going to call it 5080 Super. I don't know. I think they should still use 5080 Ti naming convention. I think the Ti naming convention is better than the Super naming convention. But it seems like they've kind of like moved away from that, at least for these higher end cards. So I already told you guys that this would be coming. The question was when it would come. Like, not that it doesn't exist. I know for a fact that these cards exist. I just didn't know when they would come out. So I don't know. I still don't expect these cards to come out at least for the next 6 months. So, which is a good thing, because it means that when they do come out, they should be easier to get. Because if you really, really want to upgrade your GPU, now you actually have pretty decent options from NVIDIA that have decent amounts of VRAM that won't immediately be bottlenecked by VRAM limits or be terrible value in terms of like dollar per gigabyte of VRAM. So because the 5080 is horrible value like that, please do not waste money on the 5080. That is like complete and utter garbage of a graphics card. But the 5080 Super is basically going to be the complete opposite of the terribly trash 5080. Because if this thing comes out 5080 Super 24 gigs, that solves all the problems. NVIDIA will probably charge, the MSRP of this will probably be like $14.99 if I had to guess. Maybe $11.99 if they're being generous. So basically $1,200 for the Founders Edition. I don't know what they're going to do in terms of, are they going to revise the Founders Edition design at all? I really think it does need a redesign because of all the issues with the melted connector. But if this card only pulls like 350 to 400 watt TDP, it shouldn't be a problem. It's only really a problem on the 5090 because that card runs too close to the power limit of the connector. So even if they don't revise anything, I think the Founders Edition 5080 Super will be fine. But it looks like here, larger pools of onboard VRAM could pave the way for improvements in AI. Oh, here we go. They're immediately starting to say AI. This is the sort of thing that activates all the bots and scalpers. All the bots and scalpers are constantly scouring the internet for all these AI deals because they're trying to like stock up all these NVIDIA cards so they can sell them at super elevated prices on eBay and Amazon, and try to sell them off to like AI companies that have no idea what they're doing in terms of like how to actually run the company. So they're overpaying. They're using like investment capital to overpay for these GPUs. So it's kind of sad, but that is the reality that we live in right now. So yeah, whenever they talk about AI, like that's a bad sign because that's gonna immediately like get all the scalpers and bots to home in on the 5080 Super and just buy it up in an instant so that no gamer has a chance. But yeah, this is basically going to be the saving grace of the 50 series generation. It's going to come out like way later, and it's going to be like the one that actually gets positive reviews. And then when it gets positive, it's funny because it's like even when an Nvidia card gets negative reviews, it gets bought out by scalpers instantly anyway. So this one, if it gets positive reviews, it's gonna be gone like so fast you won't even see the add to cart button go from add to cart. Like it'll go from coming soon to sold out. Like you won't even see the add to cart button. That's how fast these will sell out. Just like the 5090 did back in January. Okay, well, I wanted to mention that briefly so that people are aware of this. If you weren't aware of this, we talked about this way back in like January, February timeframe, but it looks like it's definitely in the works now. And then we've got an AMD article here. So AMD's several upcoming mainstream workstation and data center CPUs have been leaked. Gorgon Point, Soundwave, that's a weird name, Soundwave, that's a CPU, Grotto, and more. So the other one that they didn't really talk about, but this was not really a leak, is the Shimada? Or is it Shimada Peak? The one that's like the Threadripper one. Yeah, Shimada Peak is in the works. That one is already like available for the Epic server line. But I'm waiting to see what they do with the Threadripper 9000 series because they could very easily create a 24-core Shimada Peak for Threadripper 9000 that has one of the CCDs, maybe two of the CCDs, who knows, or maybe all the CCDs, although I don't know how that will work with cache coherency, but they could create something like that that has X3D Vcache on a Threadripper. And if they do that, that could make a Threadripper, a lower, like an entry-level Threadripper, a really good option as like a PC that literally does like everything. It has like top-tier gaming. It has like top-tier multi-thread production, PCIe lane connectivity, memory bandwidth. It basically would have like everything imaginable in one PC. So that would be really, really cool if they did something like that. Now, I believe there is an Epic CPU that already exists. I think it's the 9175F, if I'm not mistaken. The Epic 9170F. I think that CPU is a 16 core that has like 512 megabytes of L3 cache.
Planning to get the Samsung 9100 Pro SSD. THR Meg Ace manual suggests to use the expander card in slot 2. But I can only use slot 3 because 5090 is too large. Will the SSD still work at full speed while retaining X16?
So you can use it in the Ace on the bottom slot. You just have to be aware that when you do that, you have to install it in the correct slot in the SSD card. So in that card, let's go here. Let me move this over here. Oh, wow. This has been open the whole week. I never closed it. I left that open the whole week. This Expedition thing that we talked about last week. So, the Meg Ace motherboard that you have, it's an EATX, so it's a wider motherboard. You know, you have the AM5 socket over here. You have the RAM, like here, I guess. This is the RAM sticks. And then you have the first GPU slot, the second GPU slot, And then you have the third GPU slot. And I think I may put this a little bit too far down, but you get the idea. So the 5090 Astral is so big that it's like, I think like this or something like that. So you can put the expander in here. The expander card has, if I'm not mistaken, this is the expander card. The expander card has 2 SSD. I don't know if they're like angled like this. If you remove the heatsink on the MSI expander card, you have, this is the PCI finger thing. So you have 2 NVMe drive slots on the MSI. This is the MSI expander. M.2 expander, is it called expander 0 or expander arrow or something? This is the MSI thing that comes with the Meg Ace. The Godlike also has this. So you can put up to Gen 5 SSDs in this expander card and you plug it into the motherboard. However, this card has a physically 16-lane PCIe finger. Actually, I drew that backwards. Let me go back. Wait, no, that's right. Is that right? No, it's like this. You have the short one, and then you have the long one. Something like that. And then there's like the tab thing or whatever. So the card is only 8 lanes electrically. That means only half of these have wire traces that are actually utilized. So 4 of them go to this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other 4 go to the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to use this card in the bottom slot, the bottom slot is only X4. This is an X4 Gen 5 slot. The second one is an X8 Gen 5. The top one is an X16 or X8 Gen 5. So if you plug something in the second one, as you already are aware, your GPU will run at 8 lanes. Because the first and second share bandwidth with each other when something is installed down here. But because the Astral is so large, it's this giant block. I guess I should have drawn it with a different color, but we'll just put it like this. So the Astral is like this. So your quad slot GPU covers up the second slot. So if you want to use the expander, you have to make sure you plug it in to, first of all, you can only use one SSD. You cannot use the second SSD. Now I don't know which one of these two connects to the first 4 lanes or the second 4 lanes. So you only have 4 lanes. On this one, you have 4 lanes, then you have 4 more lanes. So both of these would work in the second slot. Let's use red, actually. Or let's use yellow. But because you only have 4 lanes here, you can only use one of these 2 slots. I don't know which one, so that you may have to do trial and error, meaning you may have to install the SSD in one of them. You may be able to look, actually, if you look closely at the board, you might be able to determine which one of the SSDs, like the M.2 slots on the expander, are traced to the ones over here. The ones over here are the ones that are going to work. Because here there's like nothing. Here they have lanes and they have lanes, but they have no lanes over here. They have no lanes over there. Here you have lanes on all 16. So, very good question. So I think a lot of people have no idea what that question's asking about, but this is exactly what the question is. So yeah, the easiest, what I would do if I was in your situation, I would physically look at the expander and try to determine which of the M.2 slots are traced to the lower end, like the end closer to the power plug, or not power plug, but the small connector here for PCIe is where the power from the motherboard goes to power the card over the PCIe slot. So whichever lanes are traced closer to the power connector, not the latch, but the power connector on the PCIe, that would be the one where you would install the card. Otherwise, if you don't know or you can't tell from looking at the physical PCB, you can always just plug the SSD and do trial and error. Plug it into one of them, see if it's detected. If it is, then you got it on the first try. If it's not detected, you have to move the SSD over to the other one and then test it again. Is there a way to move that port with a cable or whatever so that someone wouldn't be blocking the bottom up airflow? What do you mean? You mean move this? No. I mean, that's physically on the board. So, some Juan? What? Yeah, but the Astral has so much airflow, because remember, the Astral has a fan up here. The Astral has one fan there, one fan here, one fan here, and one fan here. The Astral has 4 fans. I don't think it'll be a problem. As someone who... So, I have a similar setup to what you're trying to do, except mine is actually... So, in my motherboard, I have a graphics card down here. A second graphics card blocking the airflow of my 7900 XTX. And it works fine. So, you might notice that the Astral runs louder. Like the fans might be spinning up more aggressively while gaming. So you might notice that. But I don't think you'll notice much of an issue in terms of like performance or anything. But because that's such a high wattage GPU, I'm going to guess that the fans will have to run louder when you install that SSD slot. But yeah, that motherboard has like 4 SSDs. First of all, it's got one over here. The Meg Ace has one over there. It has one here. And it has... No, it's got like 3 on the board, right? Is it 3 or 4? I can't remember. I think it's got like 1 over here also. It's got 1, 2, 3... Is there 4 on there? Or is it 3 and then plus this one? I can't remember if it's 3 or 4. I know on the Godlike has 5. The Godlike has... I'm trying to remember where they all are. It doesn't have one over here because of that display. So it's got 1... 2, 3, 4, and I can't remember if the 5th one is like here or if it's like here. The Godlike's got 5 physically on the board, and then it has the additional 2 from this thing. So the Godlike can do like 7 M.2 drives, 4 Gen 5 and 3 Gen 4. Yeah, in fact, we can kind of show that. Hold on, let me see. I don't know if the lighting's probably going to be terrible, but we can show I have the camera connected to this computer because people have been asking. Because there's always the occasional new viewer that comes in and is like, well, what is the computer? So this is the computer that we're streaming on. It's similar to the setup that Super Googly is using. The only difference is he's using the Meg Ace and I'm using the Godlike. But you guys can see, I don't know if it's going to show it because it might not show it actually because it's too dark. But you guys can see, like, that white light bar, there you can see the Sapphire Nitro XTX. You can see the triple 8 pins right there. I don't need to worry about like current draw or anything because those triple big 8 pins. But underneath it is an Intel Arc B580. You guys can see that white light down there. That's the Intel Arc logo. Let me see. I don't know if you guys will be able to actually, hold on. Let me see if I put this light over here. Is that going to make it better? Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay. So here, well, it still doesn't show you guys. Yeah, you're still not able to see the. Well, I guess it shows a little bit better. You guys can see right there. That is the Intel Arc logo on the Intel Limited Edition reference B580. And then above that is the Sapphire Nitro light bar that says Radeon. It doesn't really show up because the light bar is too bright. But this is the live stream computer that we built last year. Or was it this year? No, it was last year. It was like November last year. The only thing that was added, I did add the Arc B580 back in January, but that's like the only thing that was changed. So this is the Tech Thursdays computer. Those of you who are members, you guys saw the behind the scenes video, so you guys have seen exactly the setup in the room and everything. But yeah, that is a look at a very similar setup where the graphics card is thick enough that it's covering up the whole like middle section of the motherboard. There's a new BIOS update for the Hero. When did that come out? Last I checked, I was already on the latest BIOS. So let's see. Oh, there's a new BIOS update from April 30th. It literally just came out for the X870E Hero from Asus. This update enhances compatibility with high-capacity memory modules and improves overall system performance. Oh, that might be for this. It might be for the 256 gigs of RAM from G-Skill. High-capacity DDR5 memory kit built for AMD. It's probably for that. Or maybe the Micron ones, the crucial ones. So, is that the first one? Yeah. So, I am currently on 1203. This is the one that I'm running. Now you guys got me wondering if... Hold on. Now you have me curious if the Godlike has one also. Because the Godlike... Whoa, the Godlike has an update too. Agisa 1.2.0.3C. But all it says is security update for Ryzen 9000. So the Hero doesn't mention anything about the Agisa update. So there is a new Agisa that's coming in, guys, and I think it's supposed to do some stuff with not just security updates, but I think it does something with RAM. So maybe this one. So the Godlike has a BIOS update from April 24th. And the Hero has this one. Let me see. What about the X870 Nova? Because this is the one, out of all the ones, this is probably the one that I would update the most frequently, because this is the one that's actually used for benchmarking. Or for like videos, like how-to videos. So they haven't had an update in a while on the ASRock one. At least not for the Nova. Maybe the Tai Chi, because the Tai Chi is the flagship board. But yeah, so it looks like this one has one, but there's no mention of Agisa. And the Godlike has a new Agisa code. Google AI says the update is for RAM that runs the 6800. I think that Asus did that a while ago, though. Asus did 2DIMM at 6800 with AEMP. That was back in February on the Asus Crosshair Hero. Yeah, that was when ASRock put that one out. ASRock did the update back in February for Agisa 1203A. I think that was also Asus. Oh no, Asus, yeah, okay. So, Godlike had like 2 updates in March. And like the Godlike had a bunch of problems, guys. Like I'm not going to lie, like there was a bunch of people. So I made that one video cuz if you guys have been following this channel, back in January or maybe it was even December. I'm trying to remember, it was December or January. I made a video to help people that were having the problem, the dreaded dynamic dashboard 3 issue on the Godlike. I gave them a workaround on how to fix it, but it was a temporary fix. MSI eventually came out with a permanent fix. So the permanent fix is on the website. So you guys need to go, like anyone who has a Godlike, if you haven't fixed the thing, if you're not aware of it, well, I guess if it's not affecting you, you don't have to do anything. But I would still recommend being on the latest BIOS, regardless. But there was a bunch of problems, and it's weird because it's like MSI so January and February, MSI had like no BIOS updates for the Godlike, and there was like all these problems and people were complaining about the dynamic dashboard thing. And I told people downgrade to A15 from November. This one, when I was on this BIOS, I never had the problem. Once I went to like A22, I started seeing the problem. So then I came up with the workaround and I made that video. But then what I also did, and I did mention this in the video, I downgraded to A15. And after I did that, I never experienced the problem again. And then MSI came out with a fix. I followed their instructions. I did the permanent fix. And I never have seen the problem ever again. And then I went from A15 all the way to A27. That was back in March. And then I think I'm on... Actually, I can check right now, because I don't even know what I'm on. I think I'm on... I'm definitely not on the latest. I think I'm on A3 or A30. I'm pretty sure I'm on A3. Yeah, I'm on A3. So my Godlike is on this BIOS currently. So one away from the latest. I didn't even know this one was out. Yeah, I wish the release notes for all the motherboards were better. These are so vague. And like this one, I mean, ASRock improved minority proportion of AMD 9000 series CPU boot issue. So people who read this have no idea that the translation, just for those that are trying to wonder like what this means. What this means is they increased the voltage. The pull-up voltage on the post is now higher. Not lower, it's higher. Because the problem was it was too low and some CPUs weren't able to post, hence the whole, oh, ASRock motherboards are killing CPUs. That was never actually, they were never killing CPUs. They were just not able to post, so people thought that the CPU was dead. But the problem was the CPU needed slightly higher voltages to initialize to run stable. And that is what this BIOS update does. So basically, ever since version 3.20, there has been no problem with ASRock motherboards with AMD CPUs. So all those, because you guys would be surprised, or I guess not surprised, but there's so many people leaving comments on my videos, my tier list video, my unboxing video, my DDR5 videos, like saying, can you comment on the ASRock killing CPU issue? What about the ASRock CPU issue? What about ASRock killing AMD CPUs? There's literally no problem. There's literally no problem. And it's like, I'm not going to reply to those comments because those comments, those people are misinformed. And it's like the internet is like an echo chamber of a bunch of like misinformation. The reality is there's no problem. Like if you're on the latest BIOS and you're on an ASRock motherboard, there's literally no problem. And I am someone, and they're like, oh, well, don't use the 9800X3D in the Nova. Well, guess what? The CPU that I have in the Nova, and it works 100% totally fine, is the 9800X3D. And it's going to stay that way. I am not removing the 9800X3D from the ASRock Nova. This is the platform that I will use for any future GPU comparison videos. So when we're going to do GPU comparison videos, we're going to use the Nova, and we're going to use the 9800X3D, and that is how it's going to be, and it's not going to die, and there's no problem. And as long as you're someone like me who knows what they're doing, you're not going to run into any problems. And as long as you build your PC properly, you're not going to have any problems. So the major problems where people were, quote-unquote, seeing their CPU die in an ASRock motherboard, that was all down to either user error, like the Gamers Nexus video that recently came out on their customer or consumer advocacy channel. So Gamers Nexus, for those that don't know, Gamers Nexus has another YouTube channel called, I think it's called, what is it, GN? I forget the full name, but it's basically the spin-off channel where they do like consumer advocacy. GNCA, thank you, yeah. So Steve put up a video on that channel, I think it was today or yesterday. And it was an investigative, it was an attempt to see if there was a problem with the so-called AMD CPUs dying. And go watch the video, because the video basically proves my point that there is no actual problem with the ASRock motherboards. So waste of time and money. Exactly, it was a waste of time and money. The person who Steve bought the defective motherboard off of basically bent one of the pins and claimed that the CPU or something was like dead or something wasn't working. And they ruled out that, I think they tested like another motherboard or something, or like the friend's motherboard or whatever. I forget the full details. The bottom line is nothing was wrong with the vendor of the motherboard. So in this case, Gigabyte, no problem. ASRock, no problem. The problem was the user bent one of the pins, and that was one of the pins for the memory controller, hence why they were seeing the DRAM LED. And I'm willing to bet that if they had a postcode debug on the motherboard, they would have been able to figure out that it was a defective motherboard. But because, and Steve pointed this out, because there was no 7-segment display, aka the postcode debug, all you have is like a blinking DRAM LED, which you don't know if that means memory training or if that means defective memory or defective CPU or defective socket or defective whatever. Like, you have no way of knowing. You're basically in the dark. And that is the reason why I will never recommend a motherboard that does not have a postcode debug. And this is a lesson to motherboard manufacturers, all of them, that they can avoid unnecessary RMAs and a waste of time if they put postcode debugs on their more basic motherboards. Because cost cutting and removing the 7-segment display is ending up in costing the motherboard manufacturers more money in returns from places like Micro Center and Newegg and unnecessary RMAs, because the user has no idea what the error code is, because there's no postcode debug on the motherboard. So those of you that are members of the channel, if you watch the latest video, which is a members only video because it's another behind the scenes video, so I go over my collection of my old motherboards from the time that I built my very first PC up until the current generation PCs. And one thing that you'll notice, I didn't really point it out in the video now that I think about it, every single one of those motherboards in my collection, including the very first motherboard for my very first PC, all of those motherboards have postcode debugs on them. So the postcode debug is a thing that, it's not like this is a new technology. I mean, this is something that has existed probably since desktop computing was a thing, because your American Megatrend, BIOS, postcode, blah, 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 all that stuff, Dr. Debug, all those things, like, those are things that have existed as industry standard for decades. And taking those away from the motherboard is ending up costing a lot more in unnecessary frustration with the end user. So, yeah. It's like, this is another reason why the Nova is S tier, because at $349, it's giving you the postcode debug and like all the other things that you don't even know you need. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah. It's unfortunate that that's kind of the entry level price point now for these kind of basic, like, diagnostic features. Yeah. See, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't read, like, Build a PC subreddit or any of those things, because I used to look at that to see what people were suggesting, and to me, it's a bunch of, like, I don't know, it's like nonsense, to be honest, most of it. Some of it's good, but most of it's like complete and utter nonsense. It's people that are acting like they're like a senior level PC builder, but when you look at what they're suggesting, it's a bunch of stuff that doesn't have diagnostic tools, doesn't have the proper PCIe layout for what the end user might do. It's just, no, it's like bad advice most of the time. Sometimes it's decent advice, but most of that stuff is bad advice. So it's like, I don't even pay attention to those subreddits, because it's like, I know how to build PCs. I've never had problems with people running into, like, all these issues with, like, the ASRock boards. I personally have been using the Nova for months now. No problem at all. And guess what? I'm using a 9800X3. I'm using the quote-unquote worst offender CPU to pair up with the ASRock board, and I'm having zero issues. And in my other PC that I use, like in another, not here, but like when I'm like traveling, that one also has an ASRock motherboard in it. It has the old X670E Steel Legend that has been featured in previous motherboard or previous videos. And guess what? That motherboard has my 7800X3D in it, and that one has zero problems. So basically, for me, ASRock plus X3D is the combination that I always go with because that is the value king for the average PC gamer. So 9950 X3D is in a different computer. We're talking about the computer that I use for benchmarking for video content. And that is the ASRock computer. Yeah, I do have a 9950 X3D, but that's in a different computer. Wow, that's the same sort of question that happened last live stream, and we had to use Paint to answer that live stream. Yeah, the members on the channel, they know exactly what the setups are. Actually, I need to show the members the actual test bench setup, so that's probably another video that I'll do. That's members only. But I need to start making, like, videos for the entire audience. So, but the thing is, guys, like, there is just not a lot of interesting tech stuff to talk about recently. Like, have you noticed that? Like, the 5060 Ti was basically an utter failure. Like, that GPU is kind of dead on arrival. It's plagued with driver issues. I mean, other than so GPUs aren't worth talking about right now. So that's why I've done all these videos on RAM. I've done a lot of like DDR5 videos recently, and I'm probably gonna do more DDR5 videos because not a lot of people on YouTube, not a lot of people in the tech community cover RAM. So maybe we'll do like more RAM content. We covered CUDIM recently. I showed you guys what happens when you install CUDIM in an ASRock Nova motherboard. And we also installed it in the typical Intel motherboard, the Z890, which it is supported on officially. And that worked fine. So maybe we'll do some other, I don't know, we'll test CUDIM in like another motherboard. Or no, I think we'll try to do something else. I'm trying to think of like what would be an interesting like RAM type video. People keep asking about like high capacity RAM. But until I can get my hands on either this probably extremely expensive memory kit from G.Skill or the Crucial equivalent or something, I don't think we're going to revisit like high capacity DDR5 until I can get my hands on like this kit from G.Skill or something. So I don't know. You have 9950 X3D with the new Tai Chi, no problem so far, besides not being able to get a good memory speed timings with your 2x48. Well, it depends on what you mean by good memory speed timings. To me, 6400 CL32 is good enough, and I wouldn't mess with it after that. Stagnation is hitting hard. Yeah, it is. Asus was better for me with memory support. It depends. If you're doing 2 sticks of memory, Asus is better. If you're doing 4 sticks of memory, ASRock is better. See, here's the thing. ASRock can do an ASRock Nova or an ASRock Tai Chi can do 192 gigs of DDR5 at 6000 with like minimal tweaking of the proc ODT. We have covered this in a video. A recent video on the channel. If you want to see what I'm talking about, check out my latest video featuring 192 gigabytes running at DDR5 6000 on an ASRock X870E Nova. This is something that I have not been able to get working properly on a much more expensive Crosshair Hero, and that is the reason why I don't have a video on this channel featuring an Asus motherboard with a lot of DDR5 RAM running at high speeds. It's because I can't get it to work. I'm not going to create a video and not have it be 100% stable and then expect people to copy my settings because that's just bad, you know? Like, I'm not going to do that. So I'm only going to show you guys what I know works. I'm not going to create a video where the thing it's not 100% stable. So if it's not 100% stable, it's not going to become a video. So, yeah, at some point we may retest Asus, but here's my thing. If you want high speed, 2 sticks, high speed, Asus is the best. If you don't care about high speed, you want big capacity, like 256 gigs, 192 gigs, 128 gigs, ASRock is going to be the best in class. Second, a close second is going to be Gigabyte, then MSI, and so far Asus has been like the worst one in terms of like trying to run a whole bunch of RAM at like 6,000. Now, all of them can do high capacity at slower speeds, you know, like 4800. All four of them work totally fine at 4800 or 5200 even. Most of them will work. But anything above 5200 is going to require a lot of manual tweaking until you can get the RAM manufacturers like G-Skill to come out with these plug-and-play kits like this thing, where you literally buy a kit that comes with 4 sticks in the box, and then you just load the Expo, and then it just works. Now, you have to make sure that your motherboard supports it. Now, Asus says in the latest BIOS, this update enhances compatibility with high-capacity memory modules and improves overall system performance. So maybe this addresses that limitation that I have experienced with Asus. Who knows? See? I'm not making this up, guys. I mean, you guys can see, like, I clearly was telling you earlier, just a few minutes ago, that Asus is the worst one when you try to do high-capacity DDR5. And guess what? Here's a BIOS update from Asus that came out literally yesterday saying enhances compatibility with high-capacity memory modules and improves overall system performance. So that's a very good thing, because as far as I was concerned, ASRock and Gigabyte are like way ahead of Asus when it comes to like running high-capacity DDR5 at high speeds. But hopefully, I guess this bridges that gap. Any word on upcoming kits that will run at 8,000? So currently, the best 8,000 kits are the ones that do 8,000 at 1.35 volts. Those are the ones that I always recommend. And I think we have those in the description of this live stream. Yeah, there's one of them is literally linked in the live stream description if you want to check that one out. Those are currently the best ones. Now, I haven't really, other than the CU DIMM that we looked at in the recent videos that I did, I'm not really going to pay too much attention to 8,000 memory kits until we see higher capacity single rank 8,000 kits. What I really want to see is a single rank kit that has 2x 32 gigabytes at DDR5 8000, because it should be possible to run 2 sticks with a total capacity of 64 gigabytes at DDR5 8000. Why? Because this kit is 64 times 4. A single 64 gigabyte kit is a dual rank kit. This is the highest density dual rank, which is a 64 gigabyte memory DIMM. So what that implies is that if you were to remove half of those memory modules and only have 32 gigabytes on this exact same memory stick, now you have a single rank stick. So you could theoretically take 2 of those single rank 32 gig DIMMs for a total of 2x 32, so meaning your 64 gigs of RAM total, and you should be able to bin those, at least G-Skill or Corsair or whoever, they should be able to bin those to run at speeds like 8,000. Because that is exactly how I've been able to show you guys how to do like 48 gigabytes at 8,000, and those are currently the highest density available, which is why those are the ones that I feature on the channel, because I'm someone who cares more about memory capacity versus like overall speed. But that's just because of my use case. But the happy balance today is if you want high speed, you're limited to 48 gigabytes of RAM. But soon, because of these, we should be able to see 64 gigabytes running at 8000 real soon.
DDI, you beat Frostovec before entering Monaco Station?
You're gonna have to remind me who that boss is. Is that a place or is that a boss? I'm trying to remember. Is that I don't remember. What zone was that guy in? Or is that a place? I can't remember. We'll be streaming Claire Obscure tomorrow though. We'll be doing a lot of that game on stream tomorrow. Because I think that game needs more visibility. I think that game is so good that it needs all the coverage. It needs all the visibility that it can get. But yeah, so the point I'm making is if you take this kit and you were to convert it into a single rank equivalent, it would be 4 times 32, so it would be a total of 128 gigs. But it is a single rank kit, which is huge because that means ideally you can take 2 of the sticks and run them at higher speeds like 8000. So hopefully that answers that question. The question on the super chat, unfortunately, I don't remember the boss. Actually, I could look it up real quick. Let me see. Frost Evoke. Let me see. I just need to see what it looks like to get an idea of if I fought him. Oh, that's on the world map? No, I haven't bought it. If it's on the content, I haven't fought him. No. I'm pretty sure I didn't. So no, that's one that I'll have to do. Yeah, no. So there is one boss that I fought. There's only one world boss that I beat, and it was on accident. And it's the one that like bounces again and again, and it's like the more every time it's that the boss's turn, it bounces more times than it previously did. You know exactly which one I'm talking about. That one, I beat it, and then someone told me, like, you shouldn't beat it, or you shouldn't go around killing bosses until you have Monaco, so that Monaco can learn the move from the boss. If you want to 100% Monaco's skill tree, you need to have him in the party before you kill those bosses. When I heard that, I was like, oh, man. Because it's like, now you're either going to have to go into New Game Plus, or you're going to have to hope that you can somehow refight that monster again. Or that Nevron, or Axum, or whatever. So... you finally got the 9070 XT? Oh, that's nice. Which one did you get? 9070 XT, huh? Last stream, I think we were talking about the Asus, maybe it was the one before. Asus Crosshair Extreme is coming out soon. I know we were talking about the Godlike briefly, and we were also talking about the Meg Ace earlier. This motherboard from Asus is going to be the cream of the crop. This is the Extreme with an E. Asus always has Extreme with an E, guys. Extreme with an X is Gigabyte. You guys want to see that one? That one is the Extreme with an X. The Gigabyte X870 Aorus Extreme AI Top. This one is Gigabyte's flagship. Notice that the true flagships are always EATX. They're always the extended ATX, the really wide boards. The AI Top Extreme is an EATX. The Asus Crosshair Extreme is an EATX. The Godlike is an EATX. Like, you can see how wide the motherboard is. The only one, ASRock is the only... Oh, no, that's not true. What am I talking about? X870 Tai Chi. This is their flagship. This is another extended ATX. All of them have that wide stance. Look at that. Postcode debug. SSD, a blazing M.2 right next to the RAM. You got another one over here, the Gen 5. You have that easy release latch that doesn't scratch GPUs, unlike the Asus one, which is the reason why we're using the Nova as the test computer. So I have switched from Asus to ASRock for my benchmark PC for GPU comparisons. Just because I don't have to worry about scratching my PCIe connector on my GPU, because this uses a traditional latch, and this is very, very easy to remove GPUs with. So yeah, so all the flagships are really, really good, although, you know, like most people are never going to pay, you know, the kind of prices that they're asking. That's why really the only one, the Tai Chi at $450 is the most affordable flagship. The Godlike is probably the most expensive one at, I think it's like 1100. Well, okay, the price has gone up now. That's the thing. But this was $1099 on Newegg for a very long time. So basically $1,100. The Crosshair Extreme from Asus, I don't know. I think the rumor is this is going to be $1,400. I can't remember exactly. But originally it would have been $1,000. But because of all the craziness with, you know, the tariff situation, whatever, all that stuff, the price is now higher. So the Extreme is probably going to start at like $1,400. And then the Aorus Extreme, this one was a $700 motherboard. I have no idea what the new price is. So you had the original prices. I'll tell you the original prices were the following. The Extreme AI Top, $700. The Crosshair Extreme, $1,000. The Godlike, $1,100. And the Tai Chi at $450. So those were the prices of the flagship motherboards. It's like one way to tell it's a flagship, EATX. It's got to be a big motherboard. It's got to go in a big full tower. Or at the very least, a really large mid tower. It has to have that wide stance. It basically has to look like it's the boss's computer. You know what I'm saying? It's the boss. It's like the final boss's computer. It's got to have some level of RGB. It's got to have tons of USB. It has to have all those SSD heat sinks. It's got to have postcode debug, all that stuff. SATA this, M.2 that. The full X16. It's got to have an X8. So you have to have your shared X8. This has shared X8. This has shared X8. This has shared X8. I'm pretty sure that's shared X8. I'm very certain that's shared X8. This has shared X8. So all of them have to have, basically when I say shared X8, you know what that means? Dual GPUs. Flagship boards are meant to go with dual graphics cards. I can put 2 graphics cards in any one of these motherboards for maximum GPU AI tops. Hence the name in Gigabytes AI Top. Because you got to run 2. Everyone who does AI knows you need all those GPUs. You need to get those dual 5090s in that boss motherboard. You know what I'm saying? That's what it's all about. And in the case of Gigabyte, Gigabyte does dual 10 gig LAN. Forget about single 10 gig LAN. No, Gigabyte, you need all that AI bandwidth. Dual 10 gig. You can do a 10 gig lag on the switch side. You know, look at that stuff. Wi-Fi 7, optical audio, USB, dual 40 gigabit USB 4 on all these boards. Is the integrated audio codec module in those motherboards good enough so that I don't have to use external DAC? Most of the time it is, except I will tell you, the Gigabyte Extreme AI Top includes a external USB DAC. I'm pretty sure it does. The previous one did, but you'd have to check. I think it does though. Like, is there a way for me to confirm that though? Like, I wish they had a picture of it. Somewhere in here they'll mention it. This is the only one that I know of that does that though. It's funny, I was looking at the Gigabyte board. The one motherboard that has an external DAC, and you asked the question while we're looking at the motherboard. That's funny. I'm pretty sure it does because the previous one did. Oh, this one also, check this out. It also comes with a DDR, it has a fan, an attachable fan to provide active cooling for your DDR5. This is actually very important. It's becoming more and more important if you want to run RAM at high speed, especially if you're trying to push RAM at 8,000 or above. 8,000 is the cutoff. At 8,000, you don't need a fan. But once you go above 8,000, you need active cooling because you're having to run the voltages higher than what's considered normal DDR5 spec voltage. So, see, look at that stuff. It's got all that ease of use. It's like buying a luxury car. You're buying a luxury motherboard. It has all the quality of life improvements, all the modern innovations from the engineering team went into creating this stuff. Man, I'm sounding like a motherboard salesperson. This is crazy. It's like, okay, we're not going to talk about that anymore. But anyway, I'm pretty sure this comes with an external DAC. You just have to check. Probably, I don't know why they don't have it on here, but somewhere in here. Let me see. DAC. Well, you'd have to find someone who did an unboxing video. I don't know. I know for a fact the previous generation did have an external DAC, but I don't know if this one does or not. The others don't have one, though. Only the AI Top from Gigabyte has one, if it does have one. The others definitely don't. But this one comes with RAM, active RAM cooling with an optional fan. The ROG Extreme also includes a fan, if I can find the picture somewhere. Yes. So the ROG right there, it has a similar fan, just like on the Aorus Extreme AI Top. So the Extreme from Asus and the Extreme with an X from Gigabyte both include active cooling for your DDR5 memory. So those two do that. The Godlike does not include this. However, the Godlike includes an expander card for 2 more Gen 5 SSDs that goes in this second slot. I don't know if this... Oh, the Asus Extreme has the DIMM.2 as well. So this is similar to that in that regard. So I guess in terms of like the one that has the most stuff, just straight up the most stuff, the Asus Extreme has the most stuff. It has the RAM cooling fan, just like the Gigabyte, and it has a DIMM.2, which is similar to the expander card that the Godlike includes. Does MSI have a picture of that? Oh, right there. See, so this thing. So, but the MSI does have that fancy display that shows you, you know, like your CPU temperature, your memory temperature, all that stuff. It does have that special little glass panel there, as well as a fan header add-on. So in terms of like actual like the ones that come with the most stuff, I would tell you the Asus and the MSI come with the most just stuff, but they're also the most expensive options. These are both your, like $1,400 motherboards. So they better come with the most stuff if they're going to cost that much money. The Gigabyte one comes with a fancy Wi-Fi 7 antenna that has RGB. But I don't know how many people care about having RGB on their Wi-Fi antenna. I don't know how many people actually use Wi-Fi with a desktop computer. Considering this motherboard also includes dual 10 gig LAN, it's kind of bizarre that they would put that detail on the Wi-Fi fan. Or Wi-Fi fan. I keep saying Wi-Fi fan. The Wi-Fi antenna. But this one does include a RAM fan. And this motherboard, the original price was $750. So significantly cheaper. We're talking like half the price of the Asus flagship. But, I think this one's pretty good if you can find one at that price. Considering how crazy the prices of computer hardware is getting now. The unboxed graphic is quite... Yeah, I know. I think like everyone needs to do that. Yeah, it's really good that Asus does that. That's really, really good. It's very helpful. ASRock doesn't do that at all. Wait, do they? No. Well, ASRock is like, okay, here you go. It's like, you get your magnetic Wi-Fi antenna, and that's basically it. There's a bunch of SATA cables and things in the box, and in the manual or whatever, and that's basically it. Hey, but at least they show you get a backplate. You get a backplate on all of them, though. Backplate. Does MSI show their backplate? They don't show it, but they have one. You can even see it, though. You can see it kind of like right there. There's subtle hints that it has one. And then the Aorus Extreme also has a backplate. I don't know if there's any picture that kind of like hints at it, but it does have one. So yeah, all flagship boards are EATX. They all have backplates, and they all have like some kind of included like gimmick thing. Although the Taichi, it doesn't have any of those things. But again, this is a $450 motherboard. This is a $450 flagship motherboard. So I can't really fault them for not having any of the other little thingies because it's significantly cheaper. It's like less than half the price of the ROG Extreme. So we can overlook that. All right, guys. Well, I think that's pretty much it. In terms of the news, we talked about the upcoming 48 or 5080 Super. Samsung HBM. Samsung's HBM4 reportedly attracts interest from Nvidia, Google, and Broadcom. Korean giant hopes to turn around HBM business. I think this is something that only really appeals to the people in the AI space because what this means is they're currently in a technology race with SK Hynix and Micron because Samsung is actually, I don't know, like they've been having some issues in recent history. Like they're behind compared to Hynix and Micron in HBM world. Also, Samsung has not really been an industry leader in the DDR5 space. Most people who are in the know when it comes to buying DDR5, everyone knows it's like an unwritten rule or an unwritten like tech enthusiast standard to avoid Samsung DDR5 like the plague, because it's like if you want high-speed DDR5, you go Hynix. And if you want high capacity, like, 256 gigs or 192 gigs or something at lower speeds, you go Micron. Because Micron sells, up until this one from G-Skill, you can buy a crucial 128 gig kit. Now, it doesn't run at high speed. It's either 4800 or 5200. You can buy a Micron-based DDR5 kit that's 4 sticks for any of your AMD or Intel DDR5 platforms, and it's plug and play and it works. So if you were someone who cared about capacity and reliability, you went Micron DDR5. If you cared about high speed, like DDR5-8000, or some insane, like DDR5-6000 CL26, for example, you were going SK Hynix. And no one was going Samsung for DDR5. They were like dead last. They did not have the best capacity with reliable speeds. They did not have high speeds. Like, they were like the worst one for high speed. Technically, I mean, Micron, but Micron didn't even bother to compete in that regard. So they differentiated themselves in a different way. Where Samsung was kind of like that middle. It's like, well, you know, Samsung's not the best for high speed. They're not the best for high capacity. So they were kind of like a complete, you know, they were like forgotten, I guess, in the tech space for DDR5. So and apparently they've also been kind of behind in HBM. So I don't know, like maybe Samsung's R&D was too focused on like the SSDs, like the new one that Super Googly is going to install, or because they were also kind of behind the game there too. Now that I think about it, you know, like Phison has had DDR5 or not DDR5, M.2 PCI Gen 5 flash controllers since the very first one that I did the video on back in 2023. Now that, wow, it's over 2 years ago. And Samsung only recently has launched their DDR5, or I keep saying DDR5, their PCI Gen 5 NVMe controller. So they've been like 2 years behind in terms of like, they're kind of late to the party on a lot of these things. So I'm not sure what's going on over at Samsung, but they're playing catch up essentially. But that's basically what this article's talking about. But I think because the demand for AI is so high, like all they gotta do is bring this to market, and they're just gonna like sell all of it. It's no big deal. So, but otherwise, that's all I've got for this week in tech news for Tech Thursdays. So if you're new to this channel, do get subscribed. We do these live streams every Thursday, as the title of this live stream suggests. This is Tech Thursdays, where I answer your questions on anything PC DIY related. So if you're building a PC, if you're an industry veteran, you've been building PCs for years, but you may have been out of the loop for the last couple of generations, like DDR5 CPUs, for example, feel free to ask questions to get caught up. Or if you're a new-time PC builder, you're trying to get into PC gaming or whatever the thing is, like, feel free to ask questions. We answer them live. Other than that, we do sometimes cover gaming. Recently, I'll be honest, guys, like right now, gaming is way more interesting than the tech stuff, because the tech stuff is so stagnating and so expensive right now that it's kind of very off-putting for a lot of people. But do tune in to the weekend live streams that we do. Typically, we feature one or more games on the weekend live stream. We typically do that either Friday evening or Saturday evening, depending on my schedule. This weekend, we're going to be looking at Expedition 33, and briefly, we will be looking at Monster Hunter Wilds, because they do have a limited time in-game event right now that's taking place, the Spring Festival. This is the final week of the Spring Festival, so I do want to show that a little bit, because that is the only other game that I currently play as kind of a live service game that you don't have to pay for, but you do have to buy the game initially. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like that, it's like Guild Wars 2 in that regard, although I think Guild Wars 2 went free to play. I don't even know, I haven't kept up with Guild Wars in a long time, but you guys get what I'm saying. So if I'm not playing Expedition 33, then I'd be playing Monster Hunter Wilds. So we'll be covering both games this weekend, so do get subscribed, do hit the bell icon so you get notified when I go live. If you want to swing by and ask like any tech question, even if I'm playing a game, I'll answer it. So anyway, guys, thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I will see you then. Thanks.